Last week I talked about 10-episode series. This week I'm going to take a deeper look into one of them. And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is Emerald City, the newest of these shows, the one that's freshest in my mind, and the one that I really cared for. So let's start with the rating. Because my ratings are a little crazy, I'll just throw a link in the description to make sure you know what I'm talking about. Overall, the whole season, I'm giving a solid gold. Original telling of stories, great concepts, and a fair amount of nostalgia thrown into the mix. And of course, special effects and mass marketing didn't hurt. I'm going to be talking about specifics, so of course I gotta throw a spoiler warning up here, but if you've watched my other reviews, I shouldn't be covering much that they didn't. Based on the Wizard of Oz movie and books, this series is a TV show with 10-episode seasons. So let's discuss the elements of fiction in it. We're going to start with the setting. Starts off in a relatively normal world. Specifically, it starts off in Kansas, some small little town, and we recognize this from the movies. It's not quite in black and white like in the movie, but it is obviously a toned down color palette. And then, of course, it goes somewhere over the rainbow, to the powerful fantasy world of Oz. Now, Oz itself is a pretty sprawling place with all sorts of things, but the main settings are that of Emerald City and its counterpart, the technological City of M, and that's pretty straightforward. The characters, on the other hand, are where we get a little crazy. I'm going to have to say that several of them are completely new characters that are just using base concepts. We meet Dorothy and she's a nurse. She's an adult and a powerful individual, and obviously by the end of the season we learn that she's a witch. Those ruby gauntlets are helping her. Her companion through all of this is Toto, a police working dog. He's pretty cool and very useful. And then we get the cardinal witches. We start off with East, who is the one that Dorothy kills and takes her power. We have West, who's a bit of a drug-addled weirdo who may or may not be a prostitute. We have Glenda, the not-so-good witch, who's obviously plotting. We have Emin, who turns out to be the cowardly lion. Not cowardly because he's afraid to fight, but cowardly because he changes sides as soon as things turn bad. Then we have our Tin Man, and our Tin Man is very different than the Tin Man we're used to. He and Lady Eve are constructs made by Dorothy's mother, who understands real-world science. Up next we have our Scarecrow, and all the changes we need to talk about Scarecrow. He was Glenda's husband, although we didn't know that at the beginning of the season. He had his memory taken from him in a spell that was meant to protect him, and as such, his lost mind was his lost memory. And then we have Tip, and oh boy is Tip a whole nother thing. She's the Queen of Oz, but she was disguised as a boy. And why? Because everyone fears the wizard, and the wizard is an asshole with a capital A. So, there's too much to go into here. Let's try to just pin down some protagonists, so that we can try to follow them. Dorothy is obviously our first and foremost, as she always was. She begins the season off understanding exactly where she is in the world, and she ends it in a complete state of confusion. She's also a powerful witch that has those gauntlets still. Up next, I think Tib is our main protagonist other than her. Well, a mixture of Tib and Jack. Once we get into point of view and into theme, I'll show that Jack and Tib mirror each other, from starting off as one thing and becoming something else, and at the same time are actually running counter to Dorothy's plot. But all in all, I think the three of them are the ones that are really pulling the story together. And what type of story is this? Well, the plot is pretty straightforward, and it's pretty linear. There are some flashbacks, of course, but all in all, the plot is running real time. Now, the interesting thing about the plot of this show is that where it is a duplicate of the story of The Wizard of Oz, it takes quite a few liberties and changes. The actual plot twists that I would like to talk about mostly are the fact of what really Evie is and who Dorothy's mother really is, and the fact that Dorothy's mother is still alive and living in Oz. And of course, the reveal that Tib is the queen. Now, all in all, these plot twists came out slowly, and were pretty well paced throughout the season. The story itself is still a coming of who am I story, and at the same time is still focused primarily on a small set of characters, although the exacts of the characters are different, and next season will be even more so. Now, as for the point of view, much like with the protagonist, I think that the point of view characters are pretty self-explanatory. I really think for the most part we're following Dorothy, with a little bit more at the end following Tip, and more in the middle section we were following Jack. But for the most part, we definitely were not following the wizard or any of the witches. Now, then comes theme and symbolism. And you know what? This show was crop full of it. Let's just start with the fact that it was technology versus magic. But it wasn't at the same time. There was some great symbolism with the wizard listening to Dark Side of the Moon. And with that, I want to talk about the wizard for a second. Because the wizard's a control freak that's all about the lie. And he wears a toupee hairpiece. Why? Because he thinks that he can control time itself. And he can't. Then we have Iman. And Iman is one of those types of turncoat soldiers that you see in fantasy stories. But his version of the Cowardly Lion gets a punishment. And you know what? It's a great question about the difference between justice and vengeance. He killed Tib's family. And then, as punishment, she took his family from him. But she didn't kill him, because that would be wrong. Instead, she just took the memories, much like Glenda did with the Scarecrow. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And as long as we're talking about Glenda and Tib, there were some child soldier questions in there as well, with how Glenda was breeding the witches. There's probably 100 more things of theme and symbolism I could go into. But let's talk about what worked and what didn't. Specifically, this is the point where I normally do the good, the bad, and the ugly. However, I've been thinking that cowboys don't quite fit my motif. Maybe this fits a little better. I don't know. What do you think? Which good, bad, and the ugly symbol should I be using? Which one do you think should fit me better? Let me know down in the comments. For now, I think I'm going to go with ninjas. Alright, so let's start this off right and go with the good. And we are going to start off with the cast. Everyone in it did an amazing job. Not one of the portrayals of the characters did I think was hammy or overdone. And then we're going to go to the fact that it is an adaptation. And as far as adaptations go, it was pretty damn good. And even though it wasn't 100% faithful to source material or movie, you definitely got the feel of it. The conflict was all very well done out, and they thought through consequences of several actions. I liked the fact that they foreshadowed the idea of it being a magic versus technology war because guns could be the equalizer, but then proved that it wasn't true. At the end of the day, you need to be a wizard to kill a wizard. Although that does leave a little bit of a plot hole, and we'll get to that in a minute. I also liked the whole analogy of a heart being made of mechanical, and as such, the heart would no longer break. I liked the entire idea of there being a love triangle, although not always in the best ways. They also got to put a few things out there about drug use, and a few things about, I still think that Tib in modern telling is a little bit of a transgender hero. And at the same time, they did some awesome things that are just special effects. Those giants, the way they did magic, even the tornado was good. And I loved the updated Toto. The idea of Toto actually being useful was a brilliant idea. But okay, let's look at the bad. I think this show suffers from postmodern Game of Thronesism. The idea that G.R.R. Martin put out that there's no such thing as a hero. That the person who's a hero today was a bastard yesterday and might be a bastard tomorrow. And you know what? We really needed a good guy in this. Even Dorothy didn't have her hands completely clean as our main protagonist. But when you're adapting someone whose name was Glenda the Good Witch, I'd expect you to at least pay some lip service to her being good, and they really didn't. On top of that, we had some pretty overhanded analogies to fascism and exactly what happens with the power of the state that I also, maybe just in modern politics, I feel a little bit overdone. And then one last bad thing. Remember that love triangle I was talking about? I don't know. As much as I like the fact that they had to have some sort of reason at the end for Rowan slash Scarecrow slash Lucas not to be helping, I also think that they could have played that a little bit better. But okay, let's talk about the ugly. And there's really only two, and one's kind of a cop-out. So what's the one that's the cop-out? Well, we've been talking about this whole 10-episode structure thing, and at the end of the day, I think this show suffers a little bit for it. Several parts of the season seemed incredibly rushed. Now, that's not to say that there weren't good parts of it and that some of it worked well. At the end of the day, I think this could have been 12 or 15 episodes easily and still ended at the same point. But then the real ugly, well, other than the ugliness of the characters, because they're all bastards, the real ugly point for this show is that you never felt the main theme of the original story. The I wanna go home. Yeah, Dorothy said it and paid lip service to it several times, but at no point do I think it really connected with anyone. At no point was she really lost in the wilderness and sitting there and going, I just don't want to be part of this. I think they made it more action and more adventure and more, alright, I'm gonna go run through and do this stuff and become a powerful mage than they did, hey, I'm a person out of touch. And I think you miss a little something when you do that. But I wonder what you think. So let me know down in the comment sections what you think about this world and if there's another video you'd like to see me do on it. Then join me back here next week as we do another 10-episode show, Westworld. And of course, you've reached the part where I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe, share this video, and join our little community here. I have a Patreon going, I have a website up on Facebook. Come, let me know what you think about the TV shows and movies and how they interact, and how the stories touch you. Because that's what we're doing here. We're exploring the heart of the stories we tell. Thanks for watching and have a good night.